All right, my name is Frank Clegg, and I'm the CEO of C4ST, Canadians for Safe Technology. And I'd like to thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. I'm joined by Dr. Martin Blank and Veronique Riopel, who will be speaking in a few minutes, and by Mark Humphrey, a registered nurse, who is available to answer any questions you may have. We are here this afternoon to discuss our concerns over Health Canada's current safety standards for cell phones and towers, portable phones, smart meters, Wi-Fi in schools, homes and businesses, baby monitors, and other devices. Wireless radiation from these devices is monitored by Health Canada through Safety Code 6. Safety Code 6 has not been updated since the 1980s. China, Russia, Italy, and Switzerland have limits 100 times safer than Canada's current Safety Code 6. Health Canada's current process to review Safety Code 6 fails any tests of openness and transparency. We also suspect that Health Canada is not following any of the critical steps and scientific protocols in its update of Safety Code 6. The panel chosen by the Royal Society to review Health Canada's internal evaluation has too many members tied to industry to have any credibility. The former chair has resigned after failing to disclose a $100,000 contract. Two other panel members resigned just a couple of weeks ago. C4ST has ATI documents, access to information documents, through the Privacy Act, that shows Health Canada has hampered the independence of the Royal Society and restricted information that is to be made public. There are peer-reviewed, credible studies that show harm to humans from levels of wireless radiation significantly below Health Canada's Safety Code 6. The World Health Organization has classified wireless radiation a Class 2B carcinogen. That's the same category as lead and DDT. Recently, Swedish researchers published a study in the International Journal of Oncology. The study correlates wireless technology use to malignant brain tumors. Similar to tobacco, asbestos, and other harmful items, Health Canada, in our opinion, is acting too late to keep Canadians safe. Wireless radiation is harmful to humans in more ways than cancer. Electrosensitivity is a condition where symptoms such as increasing headaches, insomnia, pain, rashes, memory lapses, and dizziness occur when the individual is in close physical proximity to a source close to wireless radiation. For the same reason, we cannot yet explain why some individuals are fatally affected by secondhand smoke and others can smoke up to 2 packs of cigarettes a day. We cannot explain why some individuals react to minimal exposure to wireless radiation. People affected by electrosensitivity often must take measures to distance themselves away from any location where wireless radiation is present. I will note that we've asked the hotel to accommodate us to turn the Wi-Fi off in this room, otherwise some individuals would not be able to stay here for very long. So this sensitivity affects where they live, their ability to travel, work, and support their families. So here to tell her story is Veronique Riopel.
À l'été 2004, ma vie a basculé. J'ai subi un empoisonnement sévère au festicide, ce qui a affecté mon système immunitaire. Mon corps s'est alors mis à réagir, entre autres, aux produits chimiques, parfums, savons. Environ 1 an plus tard, j'ai commencé à ressentir des symptômes lorsque j'utilisais un four à micro-ondes ou un cellulaire. Mes maux de tête, douleurs dans mes yeux et chocs électriques au niveau de mon visage et de ma tête se produisaient dès le début de l'utilisation de l'appareil et disparaissaient lorsque l'appareil cessait de fonctionner. J'étais alors devenue électrosensible. À partir de là, ma condition s'est rapidement détériorée et au pire de celle-ci, à l'hiver 2006, il suffisait que quelqu'un ouvre un cellulaire près de moi et je paralysais des jambes à l'intérieur de quelques minutes. J'ai dû travailler excessivement fort pour recouvrer ma santé et redevenir pleinement fonctionnelle. Le facteur primordial me permettant, par exemple, d'être ici aujourd'hui avec vous, est le fait que j'ai encore la possibilité de retourner chez moi dans un environnement où mon corps peut récupérer de la surexposition aux champs électromagnétiques à laquelle je suis, bien malgré moi, soumise. Effectivement, jusqu'à très récemment, je vivais et travaillais dans des endroits dénués de technologies sans fil et où la charge électromagnétique était la plus basse possible. The deployment of smart meters, actually in full force in the province of Quebec, has again turned my life upside down. These meters, communicating with routers and collectors, emitting and receiving radio frequencies 24/7, take away my choice of living in a Wi-Fi free environment. Because of the router installed by Hydro-Quebec next to my family home, I have already lost one of my safe havens that I could count on. I experience painful pressure in my head, ears and eyes, electric shocks ringing in my ears, and spasms whenever I go to the house that I've known all my life. Since the full activation of that router last July, I have been unable to stay over for a night or a meal. By chance, I had a second home which has allowed me to survive in the last month. But Friday, I received the famous letter from Hydro-Quebec informing me of the coming installation of smart meters in my area. If a router is again placed next to my home, or if the surrounding grid becomes too high due to neighboring smart meters, I will be this time homeless. Electrosensitivity is not a simple concept. It is a reality very difficult to live with. If our elected officials persist in refusing to recognize this reality, the price to pay for actual and future generations will be extremely high because I am far from being the only one. Up to 1 person out of 4 will become electrosensitive. Believe me, you do not want your child, a parent, or yourself to be this person. I will now let you hear Dr. Martin Blank from the Department of Physiology on Cellular Biophysics at Columbia University.
Thank you. I made a presentation this morning before the panel that was investigating the Safety Code 6, and I'll read you the formal statement. But first let me tell you that I've been affiliated with Columbia University since 1959, and I've been doing research on electrical and magnetic effects of cells, and I've been publishing on that. I've also been active in the various societies, including the Bioelectromagnetic Society, where I was the president of that society 1 year. And in that year, I organized a special symposium to alert our members to developments that were occurring in Europe largely. And this was in connection with the precautionary principle. And we had speakers over. And as a result of introducing the members to the concepts and to some of the things that had been done activating these concepts, there was a really animated discussion. And as a result of the discussion, people realized that there was a lot of ignorance about. We have interfered with what we have evolved to be as a species. It's hard for us to think of anything, to think of us as substances of nature, or creatures of nature. But we've been on this planet for many years, and during those years, we have changed. We started out, if you go to the museums, you'll see how we started out. Relatively simple, primitive kinds of structures. And we've evolved to become Homo sapiens, the intelligent hominid. The fact is that we have not only done that as developing in our brains, but we have also accommodated to the environment that's around us. And we have gotten ourselves into a position where we are actually in harmony with the environment that's around us, in harmony with all these emanations that are coming from outer worlds. 200 years ago, things started to change very, very rapidly. The only kind of electromagnetic stuff that was reaching us, that was non-ionizing, was really from the sun. There was a little bit of stuff that came, a very, very weak stuff that came from lightning storms that occurred on the Earth, the so-called Schumann resonances that are still with us. But the whole range of non-ionizing radiation was not there. There was no power grid, there were no electrical bulbs, there was no radio, no television, no computers, you name it, all the stuff that's part of modern living. And we lived with that now in our, for virtually with increasing amounts for the last 200 years, and it keeps on increasing. There are more and more encroachments on ourselves as a biological species. I'm not speaking about as citizens, or not speaking as civilized people. I'm just speaking about us as living biological creatures. And as biological creatures, we are now being subjected to conditions that we never evolved to survive in, more or less than that, to thrive in. So we are being confronted by this, and the result is that nobody's paying too much attention. There are people who are bothered. These are the so-called sensitive people, but we're all sensitive. These are just hypersensitive. They're reacting to their greater sensitivity. A number of years ago, people measured the electrosensitivity of human beings. In this case, mainly adults. And the thing is, in fact, the entire study was done on adults. And they measured the electrosensitivity of people. And they did it in the sensitivity of the skin. Because the skin protects us from the outer world, and it has a certain resistance to any kind of electrical disturbance. And it was found that people generally had a range of electrosensitivity over a factor of about 100. There were some that were 100 times more sensitive than others. If you look at the curve, it's what you ordinarily expect. It's a bell-shaped curve, you know, the classic bell-shaped curve. And it has, most of the people cluster in the middle, but then there are extremes. But when you get to the very sensitive, the extreme, you find it's not a smooth curve. There's a little bump in it. It's a very small bump. It was the order of a couple of percent at the time it was measured, which was about 10 years ago. I suspect that that bump is larger now because people have been sensitized. They have been living under conditions that are not natural for us. I'm speaking as us, not as citizens of an advanced Western country, but as us, as hominids, as people, living beings on the surface of the earth who evolved to be compatible with nature. And our nature is changing. We have introduced so many changes in the environment that we're not living in the same environment that we were optimized for. Evolution has been a great process. It has allowed us to evolve as a species to develop a greater ability to live harmoniously with our environment. But what do you do when the environment keeps changing? We have so many different chemicals now in our environment that we never had before. And we're reacting to them. People become chemosensitive to certain things. And one of the things that chemosensitivity has led to, in a number of well-documented cases, is electrosensitivity. So people who start to react to some of these trace chemicals that we come across in our environment now are electrosensitive. A well-known publicized case is Gro Brundtland, the former president of Norway, who was also the head of the WHO office that was investigating electromagnetic fields. And she came upon, she's electrosensitive, and she became electrosensitive when, after she was exposed and became chemically sensitive. So that seems to be the root for many people. So we have many things in our environment now that are different. And the electrosensitivity is now out of control in terms of the number of devices that are being introduced that really that are affecting us in an unnatural way. And I use unnatural as a biologist. I'm telling you that this is not the sort of stuff that we were meant to live in. And when I say meant, that we were designed, or we were designed by nature. I don't know how you want to put it. This is usually touching on religious grounds, so I don't want to offend anybody by saying something in the wrong way. But the fact of the matter is, we are animal creatures that evolved on Earth, and we've gotten ourselves by the way we've survived. Those who've survived were those who were most compatible with the environment. And we have reached the point where we're quite compatible, and now we're changing the environment very violently, both chemically and electrically. And it's having disastrous effects on some people, but they are the tip of the iceberg. It's going to have disastrous effects on all of us because the effects are overwhelming. Now, I don't want to be a prophet of gloom and doom, but I'm just telling you what the data are. This is something that we can recognize now, and the result is we've got to take action to control it because we have the ability to intervene and do make changes that will alleviate our condition and project us into a future that we are more compatible with as a species. So this is a kind of a long introduction, but I'll read you the statement that I made that was addressed at panel Safety Code 6. because they are the ones who are the guardians of our problems in exposure to electromagnetic fields. And I'll read you the statement. It's kind of straightforward, but it has to do with the way they have been set up, and their setup is just wrong from the word go. Health Canada and other regulatory agencies are making a serious mistake when they do not pay attention to the biological research studies showing non-thermal adverse effects. They have been assured by physicists who explain that only ionizing radiation can knock electrons out of atoms and cause chemical changes. What physicists say is true, but completely irrelevant in biology. There are many ways in which living cells can and do cause chemical changes. Indeed, the cells in our bodies produce their vital chemical changes under isothermal conditions. This means under conditions where the temperature remains constant. You know, your temperature stays where it is. You've got what's known as body temperature. And if you're not well, you can take a thermometer and measure it usually in your mouth, and you can see whether you've got your temperature's gone up. That tells you that things are not the way they should be. But the fact is that most of the stuff that goes on is at the same temperature. So temperature increase is not a pretty good indication of what the EMF is doing to you. Health Canada should be speaking to biologists who have published thousands of peer-reviewed studies documenting adverse effects due to non-thermal levels of non-ionizing radiation. Better still, Health Canada should be relying on testimony from the cells themselves. Living cells tell you when they are threatened by environmental changes. They start to synthesize stress response proteins, and they do so in reaction to changes in pH, toxic metals, alcohol, as well as changes in temperature. Our research at Columbia University has been about the production of stress proteins, and we, as well as many other scientists, have published clear evidence that cells react to EMR as harmful at far below thermal levels of RF. In other words, Health Canada is not on the right track. They're looking at the wrong thing to protect us from the effects of RF. For years, increased temperature has been considered a critical factor leading to harmful effects. It is now clear that safety standards must be revised to take into account the non-thermal biological responses that occur at much lower EMF intensities. The current Canadian safety standards do not adequately protect the health and welfare of the public, and especially its most vulnerable members, children. I urge you to revise Safety Code 6 to take into consideration these established scientific findings. And when I ended my remarks, that's the end of the formal remarks, but when I ended the remarks, I said that one of the interesting things about the whole setup, political setup, is that industry has viewed these kinds of biological reviews as threatening, as harmful to their position. They should be viewing these results as an indication of where they should be putting their energy and what they should be doing, because industry has tremendous power. They've been able to overcome all kinds of problems. They have the wherewithal, they have the funds, and what they need is the willingness to do these kinds of things. They can make things a lot safer, and they can join us in our efforts to improve our environment so that we can all live more safer lives, and lives more compatible with nature. Thank you.
I'll just make some concluding remarks. So what we're asking today, we have several requests. The first one is to the Royal Society panel. We're asking them to reject Health Canada's current internal review of Safety Code 6. And we're asking them to really demand that Health Canada update its process to be truly open and transparent and subject to international standards of scientific research and evaluation. We're asking Health Canada to provide a non-redacted copy of their agreement between the Royal Society panel and Health Canada. We're asking Health Canada directly to follow international scientific research protocols that provide open and transparent review of its analysis and conclusions. We're also asking Health Canada to acknowledge that electrosensitivity exists. and take responsibility as outlined in the report of the Standing Committee of Health in August of 2010, which stated, I quote, to ensure that it has a process in place to review and respond to reports of adverse reactions to electromagnetic radiation emitting devices. And finally, we're really encouraging Health Canada to adopt much more protective exposure levels comparable to global best practices in countries such as Italy, Switzerland, Russia, and China. Thank you very much. We'll take any questions if you have them.
My name's Wayne at CBC. You say in the release that you issued today that you uncovered documents that prove Health Canada is controlling this independent safety review. What can you point to in those documents? Speak to that, because it's a fairly strong claim.
Well, we have in the documentation, there's a memo from Health Canada to the Royal Society. In our opinion, in that memo, they're listing suggested speakers. There's a discussion about what information can be disclosed and not disclosed. And in our view, if you're truly passing this over to an independent review, then you do not try to influence the panel members. You let the Royal Society go out and find true independent panel members. You do not make suggested questions that they should or shouldn't be asking, and you certainly don't have a dialogue about what material should be made available to the public. The little that I know about science, I don't know much about scientific research, but I certainly know a lot about technical research. And it's all about you take a position, you evaluate what are the questions that you want to ask. You have a rigorous process on deciding what evidence is included and what is excluded, and you publish all that material. There's nothing that Health Canada has published. There's nothing historically or in this current review that allows the scientific community to really do a proper peer-reviewed, open debate about their findings and their conclusions, and even their questions that they're asking going into it.
But to be clear, the documents that you have, do they suggest interference, or do they prove interference?
In my opinion, I think they prove that there's interference. They're not allowing the Royal Society to truly work on their own independently from being influenced by Health Canada.
And when you ask that they reject the internal review, you're asking the Royal Society to reject the review. If you could be more specific about what it is you're asking.
Okay. The way we understand it, again, this is all based on redacted documents. Health Canada would not tell us about their process. So what we believe is they have finished an internal review that was finished in the fall of last year. And then they pass that review over to the Royal Society and ask the Royal Society to do an independent review of that. What we're asking the Royal Society to do is to reject that internal review that Health Canada has completed and say it doesn't pass open and transparent communication. The Royal Society does not have the resources to do a proper, full, and thorough investigation of all the science that's necessary. They're asking us today during the panel, during our open public communication, to send them information on reviews. How can you possibly do a thorough review of Safety Code 6 when you're relying on a mom from some part of Canada to send in the most recent study? To me, that just doesn't seem like it's a very rigorous process. So I think it's incomplete. It's not thorough, it's not resourced properly, and it's not open. So we're asking the Royal Society to go back to Health Canada and say, this doesn't pass muster, this doesn't pass international standards. Please go back to the drawing board and redo your internal review of Safety Code 6.
Mr. Clegg, Terry Biddle of the Canadian Press. I'm just wondering, there's been a lot of talk about the Harper government suppressing the views of scientists in its employ. I'm just wondering if you think that what's going on here falls in line with those concerns.
I'm not a scientist. I can't comment in general about scientists, but I do believe that Health Canada hasn't taken the initiative to make sure that the Royal Society has the research ability to investigate all the science material that's out there.
And what are the implications in your mind of the changes that you would like to see take place in this safety mechanism for wireless?
Well, I think that the process is just fundamentally flawed. I think that what Health Canada has to do is to take a step back, and there's a document from one of the Canadian expert, Dr. Meg Sears, who submitted a 12-page document to the panel. It just lays out, first of all, you state the research questions that you're trying to ask, and you publish those. And then you state the questions that you're going to filter evidence that you're going to include or exclude. And then you go to that and you list all that documentation. And then you state the next step that says, okay, here's the material, the next level of filtering. and the next level, and the next level. And each of those levels of filtering, of exclusion and exclusion, form what's called the weight of evidence. And Health Canada has not published the weight of evidence material. They keep talking about weight of evidence. We have no idea what evidence has been included or excluded. So follow that rigor, follow that process, and then you come out with a conclusion that says, here's the conclusion, and then where does the science stop, and where does the judgment begin? And we don't know where the science ends and the judgment begins because we haven't got access to any of that information. You are going to make a judgment call. So at the end of the day, we see evidence that, from Dr. Blank and many, many people have produced thousands of studies that show a connection at the biological level, not the thermal level. So you have to dismiss this hang up on the thermal effect of wireless radiation and get into the biological.
I guess what I'm asking is, if they did follow the process like you think that they should follow, I'm just wondering what the net end effect would be on people who are suffering from problems related to wireless technology.
Well, I think if you look at what the Bio-Initiative report in 2007, there's some suggested levels of indoor and outdoor radiation levels. And we have seen situations where Health Canada Bell Canada proposed that in Mississauga in a certain situation. TELUS has agreed to that in a certain situation out west. So we know industry can get to that level of radiation. Now that doesn't protect the electrosensitive. What it does do is protects the general level of Canadians. What you need for electrosensitive people, we may need to look at white zones. Or if you're doing Wi-Fi in schools, you may choose a section of the school, or you may choose schools in a certain district that are Wi-Fi free. When you look at the smart meter environment, there's ways to configure. I am from the technology business, and I know there's ways to configure these systems so that there's reduced levels, minimum levels of radiation. Or maybe you take a section and you say, here's an area where we're not going to have the meters with the routers and the collectors of information. So, I have spent my career and Dr. Blank said this before, I spent my career in the technology business, and I have seen amazing, amazing technology solutions when people are challenged. Right now, I think Industry Canada, Health Canada, the federal government is missing the opportunity to go to industry and say, we challenge you to make those Bio-Initiative levels, and I think I've seen it, industry would respond. Yes, sir.
Est-ce que je peux poser ma question en français?
If it's to Veronique, yes.
I can translate.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I am Denis Morin, member for Blank and Veronique, and I have a question more on the political side, because in the past few years, the previous Minister of Health, William Bucat, did bypass the recommendations of various experts panels on energy drinks, the new classification, or the norms on the level of sodium in food. So each time she decided to go against the opinion of the experts. Do you believe that beyond Health Canada, she had a say in this? Because we know that some lobbyist groups are very influential with the concept of government. So do you believe that it goes straight to the office of the Minister of Health?
I don't know. I can't comment on that. We're really focusing on our energy on, as I say, there's a scientific process, and let's fix the science. And people will make good decisions with good information. And my concern right now is I don't believe that there's all the good information is being made available to the people that are deciding, including the minister. So our focus is on fix the science, fix the process, get the right information out there, let it be debated and evaluated on a worldwide basis. Canada has a reputation. We've led in the pesticide situation, and we are referenced around the world in some of the work we're doing in pesticides. So here's an opportunity for Canada to take the lead among other countries like China and Russia and Italy and Switzerland, and take the lead on putting in more precautionary levels. And as a Canadian, I want us to do that.
Thank you.
Any final questions or thoughts? Well, listen, thank you very much for your time and attention, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.